When I finished my workday and descended into the building's underground parking garage to retrieve my car, I had no idea what was waiting for me. As I entered the dimly lit garage, my mind was already occupied with plans for the evening. What's a young, single guy supposed to do on a Friday night other than meet up with friends at a bar? Unwind with a couple of beers, chat about life, and maybe meet someone interesting. As I walked through the expansive garage, humming to myself and jingling my keys, I suddenly heard some unusual noises nearby. The sounds were eerily reminiscent of the loud, wet slurping of animal jaws devouring raw meat. It was as if something was ravenously stuffing a corpse down its throat, piece by piece. At that moment, I even thought I heard something scraping in the distance, as if teeth were gnawing through pliant flesh. The darkness made it hard to see what was happening in detail, so I decided to turn on the headlights of my car, which was parked facing that dark corner. With the headlights blazing, I hoped to illuminate the area and get a better view. When I opened the car doors, inserted the key into the ignition, and flicked on the powerful lights, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. In the distance, there was only the security guard's booth, our security personnel. But behind it, judging by the continuous sounds, something definitely strange was going on. My curiosity was piqued, and I decided I needed to find out what was happening. Leaving the car doors open, I headed toward the booth, drawn by the strange noises. With each step, the slurping became more distinct, as if some large, enraged dog was devouring a corpse. But as I approached the security booth and peered inside, I was horrified to see the terrified face of Steve, our on-duty guard. He was clearly trying to tell me something or warn me. I saw him crouching in the corner of the booth, frantically waving his arms at me, pointing towards the parking lot. He was urging me not to go there, to run, to get out while I still could. But in a mix of nervous laughter and rising dread, I pressed on toward the source of the sounds. Curiosity had gripped me tightly, and the strange slurping called to me, as though I had to uncover the mystery. But when I got closer, I saw something truly horrifying. Behind the security booth, I spotted a massive creature tearing apart and voraciously consuming a human corpse, piece by piece. The creature, completely engrossed in its gruesome feast, didn't notice me at first, and I struggled to suppress my scream while trying to control my terror as I slowly began to back away. I tried to move as quietly as possible, but with each step, my nausea intensified. Then, unable to hold it any longer, I suddenly vomited loudly. The creature, engrossed in its grisly meal, heard the noise and abruptly turned its head, its eyes scanning the area. And then it saw me. With a swift, terrifying motion, the creature charged toward me, and I bolted back to the booth where Steve was hiding, grabbing at the handle, but the door was locked. "Steve, open the door, quick! Don't you get it? I locked the door to keep it out, and now you want me to open it? Never!" Steve shouted from his corner. "You bastard, open the door, or I'll break the window and crawl through, but that thing will follow me in, and then we're both dead. Open this cursed door now." "Fine, come in quickly!" Steve yelled, yanking open the door and letting me inside. As I entered, my first impulse was to lash out at Steve for taking so long to open the door and putting me in deadly danger. But at the last moment, I restrained myself. When I locked the door behind me, I could hear the creature already under the booth. "What the hell is that thing? What's going on with your shift, Steve? What is that thing? You want to know what it is? All right, let me tell you. It's Bob, my partner." "What are you talking about?" I shouted at Steve, bracing my shoulder against the door as the creature battered it from the other side. Yes, it's him. Something terrible happened to him while we were watching TV. Can you start from the beginning? You won't believe it. All right, here's what happened. We were sitting in the break room just smoking and watching the evening news. Then the news anchor started talking about some virus, and suddenly right on air, some woman, looked like a journalist or secretary, jumped him and bit his neck. Imagine that. After that, something strange started happening to Bob. He suddenly fell to the floor, convulsing horribly. I thought it was epilepsy and pulled him out of the booth to get some fresh air. But then his appearance started changing abruptly. "I can't take it, Nolan. I can't continue." "Keep going," I urged Steve, holding the door firmly as the creature continued its relentless assault. "He started changing," Steve continued, "and right before my eyes he shed his skin and transformed into some kind of monster and came after me. But just as he was about to attack, our electrician, Vlad, you know him, big guy, appeared out of nowhere and the creature went after him. I managed to escape and hide in this booth. Nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare that unfolded when I started working here. Sure, I knew there might be tension with pay, and the boss was always on edge with his endless complaints about paperwork, but I never imagined that one day, on my way back from the office to the underground parking garage to pick up my car and head home, I would stumble straight into hell. I couldn't have predicted that, in an instant, the world as I knew it would shatter into pieces, leaving only pain, blood, ash, and terror in its wake. But it happened. The world transformed, sowing relentless death, fear, and destruction, leaving behind only a fragile hope for survival. And here I was, trapped in this inferno, in the vast underground parking garage of the massive building where I'd worked for years. I was fighting for survival deep below ground with one reliable ally, Steve, our on-duty security guard, against death itself. That's right, for us there were only two choices left: to survive or to be torn apart by creatures unlike anything we'd ever seen, ravenous for fresh human flesh, eternally hungry, and prowling for prey. Our flimsy refuge was shaking violently under the relentless assault of one such beast, intent on breaking into our guard booth with a singular goal: to devour us as quickly as possible, to fill its belly with our remains, and then continue its hunt for new victims. I can't hold this door any longer. It feels like the creature is going to break through any moment, I shouted to Steve, glancing nervously at the door's hinges, which seemed ready to give way. "Forget the door," Steve yelled back. "The booth itself is going to fall apart. We need to do something now. I have an idea. Listen, Steve, we need to hold off the beast a bit longer so we can figure out our next move," I said loudly, continuing to brace the door with my shoulder. "What do you suggest? What can we do? The beast is about to break through." "We need to reinforce the door to buy us a little more time," I said. "Quick, grab that steel cabinet over by the wall." "On it," Steve replied. And with determination, he lumbered over to the cabinet, shoving it toward me with all his strength. When the cabinet, groaning and scraping along the concrete floor, finally reached me, I quickly positioned it against the door to provide additional support. It was enough to hold the beast back for a bit longer. But as I stepped back to assess the situation, I realized that one cabinet wasn't going to be enough. The pounding on the door was incredibly forceful. The cabinet was trembling and threatening to topple over, exposing our refuge to the enraged monster. Without wasting a moment, I dashed to another cabinet nearby, called for Steve, and together we shoved the second cabinet into place. We stacked it against the first one, creating a makeshift barricade with an assortment of tools inside, and only then did we feel a slight relief, as the combined weight of the metal blockade seemed to strengthen the door and secure our refuge for the time being. Feeling the guard booth creak under the relentless assault of the enraged beast, knowing that it might give way at any moment, I shouted, "Steve, you need to use your weapon now. You're a security guard after all. Why haven't you used it before?" "There was no time. We had to get out of there," Steve replied. "Besides, I'm not sure if bullets will even affect this thing. Whether or not they will doesn't matter. Shoot it between the eyes. We need to take it down quickly." In that moment, a deafening crash shook our refuge as if a truck had barreled into it at full speed. The impact made Steve clutch his ears and curse loudly. I watched as tools from the second cabinet we used to reinforce the door spilled out, clattering across the floor. The cabinet had been violently shoved from its original position. I saw the terror etched across Steve's face, and my own fear surged. It was clear that the beast was about to breach our sanctuary. "Don't just stand there, get your weapon out now." "I'm going to take its head out," Steve yelled back, nervously drawing his gun from its holster. He was standing close to me, and I noticed his hands were shaking uncontrollably. In such a state of terror, he'd be unlikely to aim accurately, or make the crucial shot needed to deal with the cursed mutant. He might even accidentally hit one of us. I decided to take the initiative and grab the gun myself. "Steve, give me the weapon. Look at your hands. You won't be able to shoot accurately in this state. Calm down, buddy." Steve looked at his trembling hands and saw the gun shaking in his right hand. Without argument, he handed it over immediately. There was no time to debate. We had to act fast to save our lives. The moment I took the gun, another massive crash rocked the booth. This time, the shelter seemed on the verge of collapsing under the impact. The cabinet was shoved even further out of position, tilting precariously. Finally, it toppled over, adding to the cacophony of metal crashing. With the door now partially off its hinges and wedged at an angle against the remaining cabinet, it was clear that we had little left to hold. I aimed the gun at the door and waited, my nerves taut with anticipation. But then a chilling silence fell over us, an eerie calm before the storm. Just then, a monstrous head appeared in the window's glass, its eyes glaring in at us. Steve grabbed a nearby bat, clutching it with a death grip, readying himself. I stood with the pistol, heart pounding. The beast, which had been battering the door, suddenly hurled itself at the window. It smashed through, but its bulk got stuck in the frame. The force of its attempt had even bent the metal of the guard booth inward slightly, but the beast was now trapped, its long claws scraping and its teeth gnashing as it tried to pull itself free, blood dripping from its wounds against the sharp edges of the booth. I fired several shots into its head. The beast hissed, blood sprayed, and it thrashed violently, trying to escape. Steve grabbed a stool and hurled it at the creature's head with all his strength. The beast managed to wriggle out, but it didn't pursue us immediately. We heard distant, retreating growls. The beast has retreated, at least for now, giving us a chance to figure out our next move, I said, meeting Steve's gaze. What are you planning to do? I asked, still listening to the distant sounds in the underground parking lot. Just trying to upgrade my bat a bit. And you're still using my gun, right? Fine, go ahead. Did you serve in the military? You seem to know how to handle a gun pretty well. I did. That's good, we need defenders, Steve said, and he began hammering large nails into the bat with a fury. In a few minutes, the bat was modified and looked menacing. Well then, let's go. I'm itching to get a piece of that thing, Steve joked, and we stepped out of the ruined booth, weapons at the ready, into the chaos of hell. The underground parking garage had become a nightmarish realm where every misstep could be fatal. Armed and on high alert, we emerged from the wrecked shelter, the oppressive stench of blood filling the air. The red stains on the concrete glowed with a sinister sheen under the dim, flickering lights, casting an ominous, repugnant odor into the air. Look at these stains, Steve, I said, my voice steady despite the tension. They're shimmering oddly in this murky light. I've never smelled anything like this before. Yeah, it's strange, Steve replied, his eyes darting around nervously. But it seems the wounded creature is bleeding out somewhere close. We need to get out of here before it hears us. His whisper briefly pulled my focus away from the foul scent of the blood, which was beginning to congeal and emit a faint, acrid haze. Steve flicked on his flashlight, and we proceeded cautiously, the beam cutting through the darkness. Soon, we spotted the injured beast hiding behind the furthest car, its eyes glinting with malicious intent. It watched us intently, its claws drawn close to its body. We had spotted it just in time. Had we approached any closer, it might have ambushed us from the shadows. Quickly, I leveled my gun and fired. The bullet struck the creature's head and it recoiled, emitting a guttural growl of pain. But without missing a beat, it slithered under the row of cars, still moving stealthily towards us. Steve, we need to move. It's about to make another attack, I shouted, grabbing his arm and dragging him toward the exit. It's incredibly resilient. How many bullets does it take to put it down? Steve asked, his voice laced with panic as we raced back to the safety of the ruined shelter. We need something stronger. These bullets aren't doing the trick. No matter how much we shoot, it just keeps coming, I replied, glancing back at the approaching threat. As I turned, I saw the dark silhouette of the creature poised to leap at Steve. At that critical moment, as the beast launched itself, I fired at its knee, disrupting its trajectory. The creature crashed into the nearby electrical transformer, colliding with it forcefully. The impact caused the transformer to explode in a shower of sparks, illuminating a vast area of the parking garage. The electrical surge coursed through the creature's body, sending it sprawling lifelessly to the floor. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into an eerie darkness, the only source of illumination now the beam from Steve's flashlight. Shall we get a closer look? I suggested. Sure, but do you think that thing is dead for good? Steve asked, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. We approached the fallen beast slowly, ready for any unexpected movement. The darkened corners of the parking garage, shrouded in shadow, were eerily silent, but our focus remained sharp as we sought a path to escape this nightmare. As we cautiously approached the fallen mutant, the beam of my flashlight sliced through the darkness, revealing a disturbing scene. My foot had inadvertently landed on something soft. I asked Steve to shine his light down. The bright beam illuminated the concrete and revealed large patches of human skin, along with torn clothing scattered around. It was unmistakably the clothing and skin of Guard Bob, positioned near the guardhouse, right where the transformation from man to monster had occurred. "Look at this horror, Steve," I said, my voice heavy with dread. "I see it. Poor Bob," Steve replied, his voice laced with sorrow. "May he rest in peace," I muttered, feeling a pang of sadness. "Do you think once he became a mutant, he still had any sense left?" I asked. "Who knows? He became a wild beast. I knew him." "It's a terrible shame," I said, feeling the weight of the moment. "See if you can find Bob's gun in this pile of torn clothes," Steve suggested, peering at the scattered rags. "I can't find it," I said, disgustedly shifting through the fabric with my foot. "No way! He must have had one. Every guard carries a gun," Steve insisted. "I'm telling you, it's not here. Want to check for yourself?" I replied. "No thanks, I'm not keen on rummaging through this grisly mess. Let's move," Steve said, clearly disturbed. We approached the lifeless mutant, and Steve's flashlight revealed its grotesque form. From head to toe, the creature was covered in glistening scales and large, swollen blisters filled with a murky fluid. Some blisters had burst, spilling a thick, foul-smelling ooze over the dead body. The stench was even more unbearable than the blood we'd encountered earlier. Parts of the creature's charred body still smoked from the electrical surge. Having defeated the fierce mutant, we ran through the parking garage, finally finding a door to an interior room. The room seemed secluded and quiet at first glance, and the sturdy metal door with a secure lock offered a brief sense of safety. As Steve locked the door and approached me, his face was etched with a serious expression. When the flashlight beam fell on him, I saw his intense gaze. He was seeking answers to a question that clearly troubled him. "What's really going on? What happened to our world?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "It looks like some kind of virus. We'll have to figure it out," I replied. Our conversation was interrupted by strange noises from a distant corner of the room. Steve's flashlight revealed an abandoned storage space filled with boxes. In the far corner, next to a large rusty generator, something strange hung on the wall. As Steve focused the light, we were horrified to see a pulsating, slimy mass, a grotesque living entity that was producing monsters.